podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because he's a New England Dutchman whose his family, it's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland.
Okay, so that was as extreme as it got. He did say some other things about Winston Churchill, but not much, and nothing more controversial than that. The rest of the conversation kind of went into another direction, talked about many other things. I think that the best part of the interview for me between Daryl Cooper and Tucker Carlson that I found extremely interesting and worth noting were the comments made by Tucker and Daryl about who looks like a winner after that war and who looks like a loser. Britain is being occupied by people that are Islamic, who either don't speak the language or do very poorly and are committing crime. There are certain neighborhoods, as you know, in Great Britain where the police will not go. And they look like a defeated country. And then they talk about, of course, our country, the immigration system of our country, how things are going badly in ours as well. So you look at those two countries that won the Second World War and how defeated they look, captured by another culture and too weak to do anything about it. Then you look at Japan, a country that had 2 nuclear bombs dropped on it, and yet they have a very culturally homogenous nation. It's overall pretty peaceful as far as crime is concerned. People integrate and speak the language there, and people overall just conduct themselves well. So one side won the war, but is now doing very badly. The other side lost the war, but actually has made decisions, taken strict measures to protect themselves. Now, I want to kind of deviate slightly from this topic very quickly, but I promise I'll come back to talking about this interview. I'm going to be talking about this for the first segment of the show. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, this show is going to take a bit of a different format. I'll explain a little bit later. But I think it's important for me to talk about something that I hit on a couple of episodes ago with American Neo-Reactionary. So quickly, I'll say first that this interview did very well. It blew up, and I think it trended on Twitter for a while. And when it comes to this interview between Tucker and Daryl Cooper, the left went nuts. But so did the usual suspects in the Republican Party. And notice I said that the left went nuts, but I didn't use the term right for Republican Party. That's because those things are not the same thing. We're going to talk about that some in this live stream. So one thing I want to say, and I think it's worth noting, is, and I said this, as I said, to American Neo-Reactionary a couple of episodes ago, that there is a lot of infighting, especially among the dissident right. There's a lot of backbiting. There's a lot of just arguing about things that are not really that important. And so I want to be very careful on this platform and otherwise when it comes to gatekeeping, when it comes to trying to keep people out of the right wing, when it comes to critiquing them and criticizing them. I want to do it in a good faith way always, in a Christ-like way as much as I can, calling out the truth, but doing so in a kind way. However, there's an important thing to talk about, and I want to play it for you. This is something that American Neo-Reactionary said to me.
An understanding of the friend-enemy distinction. I don't know if that's a term you've talked about. I would imagine you've probably heard it if you read or listen to Oren or Pete Quinones. That was derived from legal scholar Carl Schmitt in the early 20th century. Said the most important distinction in politics is that between that of friend and enemy. And I think that's if there was anything I could, I could get, normal. I'm not even going to necessarily say right wing Americans, but just normally, your normal American that has, the same interests of, wanting to take care of their kids and not be taxed to death and allowed to do normal things, would be an understanding of the friend enemy distinction. Because I think if you notice, like, you see, like, one of the tropes you would always hear, like, especially with, now with, like, the woke left today, cracking down on, like, say, edgy comedy or anything like that. You always hear about how, like, oh, like George Carlin, like, or, ex edgy comic from the 80s or 90s, like, oh, they wouldn't stand for this. And the thing is they more than likely would be on the same team as the woke comics of today.
So I wanted to play that for you because this distinction between friend and enemy is very important. So let me be very clear. If you are dissident right, if you're serious about opposing the left, if you are America first, if you are a neo-reactionary, a reactionary, a traditionalist, if you're pro-American and Christian values, especially Christian values, that's what I meant to say. And if you want to end the wars, end the Fed, take down the Republican Party establishment, and put a real right-wing agenda in our party and make a new regime that is Christian and right-wing in charge of our country, you're my brother, I'm one of you. And I will be very careful when I criticize you because there's too much infighting. I'll respect you, and I'm going to ask that you respect me. And more or less, I'll follow the rules of I will not fire unless fired upon. In other words, that's figurative. I will not attack you unless you attack me. So that's the rules for infighting in the right wing. It's different, though, when you call yourself conservative, when you call yourself right wing, and your name is Sean Hannity, or Megyn Kelly, or Bill O'Reilly. Now, those people are not completely wrong all day, every day. They just can't say anything right. That's not true. Sean Hannity, as an example, thinks the 2020 election was stolen, or at least he did. He's now changed his mind on that because the pressure was a little too hot. Megyn Kelly has realized that the transing of our kids is a big issue. And she's also realized that there's things about vaccines to question. But and so I'm saying I will call these people out when they're wrong, and sure, I'll praise them when they're right. So what I'm saying is where I will gatekeep is I will gatekeep neocons, rhinos, liars, and liberals like Lindsey Graham and William Timmons. And you have to say to yourself, when you look at these people, you have to think, what have these hosts or politicians, in the case of Graham and Timmons, done for us? There are millions of people coming into this country who speak Spanish, will not learn English, commit crimes. They already committed a crime by coming in here illegally, have no interest in assimilating to our culture, are sending money back to their foreign nation, raise foreign flags in our country, and not in a way of remembering their heritage, but of actually wanting to change parts of our country. And these hosts have done nothing about it. In fact, they've sidelined Pat Buchanan, and in the case of war, they've sidelined Ron Paul. And in immigration, they've sidelined Ann Coulter and tried to call them names. These people in our party, these neocons, globalists, and liberals in the Republican Party, have told them to shut up and instead want to focus on tax cuts. So this is a party of losers, of losing on and on and on, which is why it's so cathartic when something happens like Kyle Rittenhouse is found innocent, or the Home Depot employee is fired for her Facebook posts about wishing Trump were dead. So these people, we get into war after war after war in the Middle East too. Billions, not millions, but billions are going to Ukraine. And these people, the Sean Hannitys, Megyn Kellys, and Bill O'Reillys, have done nothing to stop it. Now, one thing that I saw, and I want to now talk about this person specifically, was the response to the Tucker Carlson and Daryl Cooper interview from someone named Steve Deace. For those of you who don't know, Steve Deace works at Blaze TV, or at The Blaze. He's on Blaze TV, Glenn Beck's platform. Glenn Beck, by the way, has praised immigration in the past. So has a former employee of his, Steven Crowder, talking about how great it is that these people would travel so far to come into our country. And as long as they have American values, it's fine, yada, yada. How about no more immigration into this country for 100 years so the people that are currently here can assimilate? How about we demonstrate we have proper control over our border? And with these people, all three of the people I just mentioned, where have you been when it comes to criticizing the wars? So I really want to continue to talk about this guy because I saw his video that he put out where toward the beginning he talked about the Tucker Carlson and Daryl Cooper interview. And I'm going to play a little bit of it for a while. But again, for those of you who do not know, Steve Deace is a brother in Christ, so I'm going to be careful. He refused to vote for Trump in 2016. He supported either Rubio or Cruz. Maybe later he supported Kasich, I'm not sure. And he went on MSNBC to talk about why. You can look it up and see that video. And with Steve Deace, I wonder to myself, where has he been on Bush, McCain, and Romney? As far as finding older episodes of him talking about those guys and critiquing them from the right, I haven't heard much. He then got on the Trump train in 2020, then immediately got off in 2024 to support Ron DeSantis. So Ron DeSantis became governor because Trump endorsed him. And I will say Ron is a good governor, but that campaign was awful. Not run well at all. Deace, around that time, seemed to reinvent himself and tried to posture like he and his co-hosts are to the right of Trump. And I will say, when it comes to vaccines and the trans agenda, they are. And they do talk they talk very well, competently, very well-spoken way about the spirit of the age in our country, our culture, and the evil that's happening. And they call it out. So they're great on that issue. I really think in the case of Deace, he's a creative. He's written books, and he also produced the movie called Nefarious. So he has a place, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's political commentary. So when it comes to DeSantis being a good governor but a bad presidential candidate, what am I talking about? There's several things. Ron, for example, said that Trump was missing in action when he did not go to the debates, which I thought was very condescending and a bit strange. He also said that we should send our military into Mexico to confront the cartels. So we should start another war and solve Mexico's problem for them. He also said we should keep giving aid to Ukraine. And then this is what he said in the debate, and you can look at this up and fact check this. He said we should give aid to Ukraine as long as it's reciprocal with aid from Europe. Trump and Vivek were way better whenever they talked about the war in Ukraine, because Ron DeSantis was fine with giving more aid to Ukraine. He just was saying we need to have Europe give more as well. How about no more money given at all to that country? How about no money given to any foreign country? No more foreign aid at all. We look after our own interests, our own country, our own borders. We're broke. Did anyone forget that we're well over halfway past 30 million, so more like 40 million, where every day we get higher and higher, $38 trillion in debt, guys. How about no more foreign aid until we get that problem under control? So what's funny about Steve Deace is out of the one side of his mouth, he will criticize the forever war complex instead of the military-industrial complex, which is a little strange. I don't know. So he'll criticize the forever war complex, then he'll support DeSantis. And I'll say that Bush and McCain, Lindsey Graham, and John Bolton love Dace Republicans. People that have this in their head, but then with their voting patterns and who they voice support for, supporting people who are actually okay with some globalism. Then to top it all off, to go back to Ron DeSantis, who Dace was supporting and pushing for, DeSantis was showed up by a Hindu. Dace and his team marketed DeSantis as some kind of a right-wing based chat, that he was going to show up there. There's all kinds of memes you can find, by the way, of these things that went around on Twitter and other places as well. One of them actually worked for the DeSantis campaign and then got fired. So they've had all these memes and videos depicting DeSantis as he was going to get in there and he's going to lead America like he's led Florida. He was Trumpism without Trump. And then a Hindu, former big pharma businessman, Vivek Ramaswamy, put Nikki Haley in her place very well, very quickly, and very easily. And yeah, did Ron DeSantis attack Nikki Haley? Sure, yeah. But Vivek did the heavy lifting while DeSantis kind of watched. And that was just not a well-run campaign at all. And Dace this entire time was his hype man. Now, to go on into this a little bit, there was also a stupid attack on Candace Owens by Steve Dace because she was supporting the Palestinian cause and not Israel. And I almost talked about Steve Dace at that point. But then I thought about it and decided not to. And I thought, well, maybe this is something small that Dace and I can just kind of disagree on. But I think he's still an ally. And then I also thought to myself, I kind of need to be careful about gatekeeping. So I ended up just not addressing that. So with all that being said, I want to play this for you soon, but I'm going to say that I had to think about this because I actually wondered if Steve was going to respond to this interview between Daryl Cooper and Tucker Carlson. And he did. I actually was looking around at other different podcast shows and thinking, who's actually talking about this? What do they think? And I saw that Steve Dace had talked about this. And in a day and time where there are millions of illegals invading our country, the possibility of this little thing, just something, called World War III, in an election in less than 2 months, Steve just couldn't hold his tongue. This is kind of what he said whenever he first attacked Candace Owens for not supporting Israel and supporting the Palestinian cause, or at least being on the side of a ceasefire. He said, I can't hold my tongue. I got to talk about this. Called her names. Not going to get into all that, but I'm going to talk about this response today. Heck, Steve Dace could have talked about Trump and abortion. And as you'll see in this episode of my show, I would cut Dace a lot of slack on that issue. There's a lot of pro-lifers that are very upset with Trump about abortion, and that's a nuanced discussion, so that's okay. But no, this was the most important. Dace decided to talk about this Tucker Carlson and Daryl Cooper interview. So then this begs the question, so I'm saying all this, and you may be wondering, why are you talking about this? Well, but I am, because he talked about and called out the dissident right. And I'm sure he's not the only person thinking this stuff right now. And I think this needs to be corrected from his right.